How to build a Blackgates Sweet Pea 5-inch gauge locomotive, part 14, checking the dimensions of the machine's cylinders and correcting a fundamental error. Cleaning up the parts to remove the rust. I mentioned in the last episode there are two ways to fix this problem. As I showed in the previous episode and the beginning of this one, I made some plates to cover the damaged areas of the ports. All I need to do is machine some new ports in these plates and sandwich them between the steam chest and the main cylinder to cover the original ports. At this point of the proceedings, I would say you should buy this book. You could buy the drawings, but they're absolutely massive, and I find engineering drawings a bit of a pain. Okay, if you've got plenty of space, which I do not have, and I just get them dirty and tear them by having them on the bench. This book does two things. It allows you to see the dimensions of the parts, albeit quite small, but then you can scan them and make them larger and take the parts individually into the workshop as you work on them. But the main thing is, it tells you how to build the locomotive. I even bought a computer scanner, and here are a couple of the scans I took from the book. Although I have blurred them out, they're a lot sharper than this. I have permission from the publisher of this book to use pictures of the book in the videos. But it would not be good to publish detailed photographs with all the dimensions. Hence the blurring of the image and the positioning so you can't see the dimensions. This is the layout of the port face on the cylinder. And here is one of the cylinders very badly machined. This will not do, and that is a problem. In case you're thinking, well, why not just reface the top of the port block? That's not a good idea though, because the cylinders are dimensionally very accurate to each other, or at least in all the parts of the cylinders that count. The marking out of the ports was correct, but then it went wrong from that point. It's obvious to me that someone has used a milling cutter of the same size as the finished slot, and it's wandered about a bit. In this clip I'm checking the dimensions of the slide valve and showing how it's supposed to slide over the ports, obviously not on its end. Slide valves have been around for a long time, and I still think they are a very clever idea to admit and exhaust steam from each end of a double-acting cylinder. It's the pressure of the steam inside the steam chest that holds the valve firmly onto the port. This is okay, but it means that there's a lot of pressure required to slide it across the port. Most steam locomotives use piston valves, which work in an entirely different way, and put a lot less pressure on the valve gear. Here's how the slide valve fits in the steam chest. There are two steam chests, two slide valves, two cylinders, and both cylinders are double-acting. I haven't looked in the book yet for the dimensions of the slide valve, but by measuring it and comparing it with where the ports are, it seems to be fine. As you can see, the port faces are a bit of a mess. My friend Andrew has a much better milling machine than I do. Andrew has agreed to mill new ports in the two pieces of steel. I'm going to go ahead with the drilling and machining of the steel plates because I will use them in the end, I'm sure, but I'm going to try an alternative method to fix the problem, using JB Weld high-temperature epoxy putty to reprofile the exhaust port and also repair the damage on the face. Will it work? Well, I don't know. All I can say is that many years ago I worked on and completed a very large model steam locomotive. One of the cylinders was a bit of a disaster. I don't know why the builder went ahead with the machining. It was absolutely riddled with a honeycomb of blowholes, some of which went through into the cylinder space. I carefully drilled quite a large hole in the top of the cylinder block. Not the port face, I mean the bit behind the ports. I also drilled a lot of the smaller holes too. I then filled the subsequent cavity with milliput, which is a 2-pack epoxy putty, including the holes that went through into the cylinder. Then I rehoned the cylinder and cleaned everything up, and that was about 30 years ago. This engine over the years has done a lot of running, and it still works, no problems at all. Down to business. The steam chests, steam chest covers and cylinders are a bit of a rusty mess, so I'm using my belt sander in the outer part of the workshop to clean off the rust and actually reprofile some of the parts. To get through the job in slightly less time, the video is running at a higher speed. Here I'm cleaning up the cylinders. I'm a bit of a dab hand at this. I've had a lot of practice and I can get quite an accurate finish, believe it or not, on a belt sander. For any professional engineers out there or people who are just really good at it, I do apologise for this inverted commas engineering aberration, but it works. Here I'm cleaning up a steam chest cover, including the edges, being very careful not to remove too much metal. This, by the way, is not a new sanding belt. This one's quite worn, but it still removes the metal and tool marks. I'm making it look easy, and it isn't. You have to have a very good feel and a touch like a midwife to do this, particularly if the sanding belt was a new one and much sharper. After a while, the parts are looking much better, so it's back into the main workshop for a closer inspection of the cylinders, and as you can see, both of the cylinders are not the same shape. The good news is, though, this is the underside part of the cylinder, and even though the cylinders are very different from each other, this dimensional difference doesn't really matter, and the important part of the cylinders are identical to each other. I could leave it like this, but every fibre of my being says no, trim both of the cylinders to the same size. What you're looking at is a fundamental error. The cylinders were not set up exactly the same for the initial machining operation. On the top of a pair of sweet pea cylinders are cutaways. These sort of match the steam chest. They're not really necessary. I thought that now would be a good time to clean up the rough castings. I'm using a flapper wheel in my Proxon motor tool. When I built the 7 1/4 inch gauge titch locomotive that I used to run around my garden, I used sweet pea parts for the cylinders. I just bored them out a bit bigger, but they were basically the same as this. These small 80 grit flapper wheels are really good for cleaning up castings. At this stage though, the cylinders are just one step away from the scrap bin. I need to verify that both of the cylinders are completely identical, and here I'm starting off with a ruler. Not the most accurate device to measure with, I know, but it's okay for starters. Here I'm measuring the inside edges that bolt to the frames, and they really are identical to each other. That is a good sign. Here I'm using an old manual digital caliper, which tells me that the exhaust outlets are in exactly the right place. And the difference between the bolt holes and the outer part of the cylinders is perfect. Once again, why didn't I just make this from scratch? The reason is simple. I have found, according to the channel statistics, the difference between the views of the start of a new series to the end of a long series is actually very different. That's why I didn't want to go to the trouble of machining all these raw components. If you want to watch machining videos, there are thousands of them. I don't mind machining, but I do not call myself a machinist. The underside of one of the cylinders has been left too big. Here it is, and it looks like someone's actually started to trim it at some stage. So it's back to the belt sander, and now it looks like this. Still not right, but better than it was. And after another visit to the belt sander, it's getting even better. The third time it was perfect. I'm going to clean up the castings all the way round the edges of these cylinders because I'm going to paint them. I'm a long way from painting yet, but I will get there. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.